over, kids, because I guess Square Enix, is it Enix? Enix? They are, I think they're being sold. Well, Bandana Gamer thinks they're being sold, and I think that they're being sold now too because of Bandana Gamer. What did they just do? They sold like half of their properties. Not half, but a lot of their properties.
They sold their Western studios, essentially.
Their Western studios.
So Square Enix, or Square Montreal, Eidos, Crystal Dynamics, I think are the three that they just sold.
What Square is the company? To me, they're Final Fantasy, but I guess probably nowadays they're more Dragon Quest.
They're both, I think. I mean, in Japan, I think they're Final Fantasy. I mean, so so Square Enix comes out of Square Soft and Enix merging together. Enix was the Dragon Quest company. Square was the Final Fantasy company. I still think in the West, particularly, Dragon Quest, while it's definitely grown, is still fairly niche.
They're definitely Final Fantasy to me, because growing up it was always Zelda, Final Fantasy. Which do you like? It was very much a Nintendo Genesis type situation. You couldn't like both properties. It was Star Trek or Star Wars back in the day.
Yeah, and Dragon Quest has always fought to get a foothold in stateside. And
okay, so that said, Square now, they're a huge company. They're, like, for a while, like, they were, like, the biggest third-party company, but they've been overtaken by, companies like Bethesda and stuff like that, even though they've been bought out. But, so Square's huge, and they had a bunch of Western properties, and they've sold them now. Yeah. So we're talking Tomb Raider, Deus Ex? How is that one?
Yeah, Deus Ex.
Deus Ex. And I think, wasn't there another big one? I think Thief?
Thief. And I mean, these are also the studios that worked on the Marvel games. This is the Avengers studio and the
Maybe that's why they got rid of it, because didn't that Marvel game suck?
They both underperformed. I think the Avengers, they wanted a service type game, and I don't think people wanted a like Destiny style game from the Avengers. They wanted and then when they kind of got that with Guardians, people were kind of not trusting Square with a Marvel property at that point.
That said, so the bigger implications, it seems like everybody is just buying studios left and right, where like Xbox has bought Bethesda, then they bought Activision, which was like even bigger, and so now Sony is buying Bungie, and it's like, who's Sony gonna buy next? Nintendo, they have bought companies here and there, but no one really like. Everybody,
it's all smaller people that were working on they were working with anyway.
Yeah, it was like second party games already. Or Nintendo even agrees that they are not in the console race anymore. So let's just pretend that it's just Sony. It's the evil empires of Sony and Xbox. It's Russia versus America, and who's gonna buy who in this missile race?
Yeah, this arms war.
Yeah, and it's like. So Square, though, now, the implication you brought up earlier was that Square is selling properties in order to make themselves look more attractive to be bought themselves.
Or they have a larger... I'm wondering if they have a larger deal in the background, and the larger company went, we don't really want this stuff over here, not to mention managing a company that has international dealings, like that kind of a merger or buyout or whatever. This is where my business is like, you can offload those to somebody else, make a little bit of money, and then once that deal's through, we will buy the Japan business. I mean, because
so you're saying Xbox was like, we want Dragon Quest, but we don't want Thief.
I could see that. I mean, we allowed those companies a little more heads up time and just kind of consolidate a bit the big hunking main thing so it is more attractive, and it's like, hey, you don't have to go deal with this international side of things to buy this.
Yeah, I honestly think you're right, because it's so weird. Lately, it just seems like everybody just wants to and maybe it's not lately. I mean, this happened like in the 1920s. You know, I used to be a history major, but it's like you build a company as good as you can get it, and then you're just like, I want out. You know, you just build. It's what entrepreneurs usually do, but they usually sell their companies really small to a bigger company. They just get the idea, they get it rolling, they sell it, they move on to the next. But these video game companies recently, or any IP, it seems like IPs are what is the most valuable thing in today's market. If you look, just going back to Disney, that's how Disney was almost bankrupt, right? And then they started, you know, they got Little Mermaid, and they started making some moves, and started making some money in the 90s, and then suddenly, I'll buy Pixar back, I'll buy Star Wars, I'll buy Marvel, and now look at Disney. ABC, ESPN, like nobody, well, I think that was part of the ABC deal, but nobody would have thought that, like, Disney for the longest time was just like, you know, it was Mickey Mouse and really good animated movies.
And amazing theme parks.
And theme parks, yes. But now it's like they own everything. And
they create synergy, though, off of that. Like, owning Marvel, you have the Marvel movies, the Marvel comics generate ideas, but then that gives them ideas for the theme parks now.
Yeah, it's
and
like...
that's why people are buying IPs. It's just like, hey, we can make, you know, a brand.
Exactly. I mean, and Nintendo itself, let's jump back to Nintendo. For a minute, Nintendo was worth more than Sony, right? And they might be right now. I'm not even sure. But if you go by the stock markets, Nintendo was worth more than Sony. And Sony, they have IPs, but in reality, they make TVs, they make this, they make that. And what does Nintendo make? They make one video game console. One video game console. That's all they physically make, and some video games. But everything is based off of this idea of some guy with a mustache in a suit, or a princess who gets reincarnated every 100 years. You know, that's all Nintendo really has. And they don't even utilize their IPs. They have F-Zero.
They're very conservative in what they do, but they still generate a lot of income from licensing it out.
Exactly. So it's like
making them toys.
So now it's just like, let's just buy IPs and ideas, an IP, an intellectual property. If you don't, it's just more valuable. So when Square just suddenly offloads IPs, that's weird, because Square, it's not like. Because, like, when Bethesda was sold, it wasn't like they're selling Fallout. They're like, we're selling everything. Yeah. Activision didn't sell World of Warcraft. They didn't sell Call of Duty. They sold themselves as a whole. Yeah. And so, like, there is something, like, so why would Square think... So it's like, why does Square think selling some of their property makes them more attractive? Because it lowers... Because this deal was for $300 million. What they sold was for $300 million.
Which I am very surprised. I think a lot of people feel like that is...
cheap.
Yeah, very cheap. Especially getting Tomb Raider.
Yeah, Tomb Raider, like it or not, Tomb Raider had a movie franchise that they could reboot at any moment. Yeah. And that's a $100 million movie franchise right there. I mean, they were... Like, people are comparing, like, oh, yeah, it's, you know, the female version of Uncharted. Incorrect. Uncharted is the male version of Tomb Raider. Now, if you want to say Tomb Raider is the female version of Indiana Jones, you can have that argument. But Tomb Raider came way before Uncharted. And it's like, Tomb Raider alone should be worth a lot of money as an intellectual property. And then you got a lot of other stuff. I mean, I think they got like 50 IPs out of this. And now the company that they sold it to, that's a whole nother video. Like
Embracer.
Yeah, Embracer.
Yeah, the new video game Illuminati that when you look into them own.
Yeah, they own.
So many people are going to, who's Embracer? And they own so much.
They own so much. But that's like, that's neither here nor there. But so Sony... thinking to themselves, like, Square, if they get rid of some of their stuff, it's like, it's almost a shady way of, like, making yourself more profitable. It's like, I don't want to, like, compare it to the WWE, but you even did that earlier. It's like, you fire a bunch of employees So now suddenly you free up a lot of cash. And by selling this $300 million, they make $300, put it in their bank. They look like they had, now on paper, they just made $300 million more dollars than last year. So now they look really good. And they aren't they lost, they sold 1,200 employees. So now that's 1,200 employees off their payroll. And so now they're looking like they're even making more money. And what did they really lose? They lost all the overhead of the buildings that the people were in. They lost this, they lost that. And all they lost was an idea of some female looking for treasure. An idea of, I don't know what Deus Ex is, so I can't really, I can only do Tomb Raider. But it makes them look like so much more profitable. So now Sony and Xbox, who are like, we want more. We gotta top the last purchase. How do I top
Activision?
Activision.
Because let's be honest, Bungie came after the announcement about Sony buying Bungie came after Activision, but it was really dwarfed by the Activision.
Yeah. Like, so how do you top that?
It's so weird to think Sony buying Bungie is like page 3 news now.
Right? So how do you top that? You get Kingdom Hearts for the kiddos. You get Final Fantasy for the fantasy. I mean, that's just a staple. And then you got Dragon Quest.
Dragon Quest, which is
huge over there. Okay,
and it's growing. I mean, its clout is growing in the States.
So I definitely think, and then, or let's say it's not Sony that wants to top Xbox. What is it? It's just Xbox still saying, let's steamroll this. Let's get in Japan.
Well, and I think that's another thing that makes it more. To get rid of these things makes the larger company look more attractive. When deals like this go through, they take about a year, and it's lawyers, regulatory committees. If they've offloaded their Western stuff, that means you only have to deal with one country or one. Mm-hmm. You have fewer regulators you have to deal with.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
It makes the deal even easier to go through.
So,
argument for Sony is Sony may only want a Japan company. They might not want that's not true because they bought. I backpace that, but I think Sony would look at those properties and say, really, all we want is Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest.
Well, Final Fantasy to me, like I've always you just kind of assume it's like very American. Dragon Quest, not so much, but like Final Fantasy seems to be a staple of the video game culture. Like the old guard, not the new guard of Apex, Fortnite, Overwatch. And while I'm sure a lot of people like do cross over, shout out to Hunter, but like not everybody, you know. So I definitely think that is Square. They must have got some feelers, or they're positioning themselves to do it. Because why else? Why just like up and say, you know what? I don't need Tomb Raider. Screw it. Why would anybody say that?
I mean, they did it before with IO, the Hitman company.
Uh-huh.
They've done that is some also. They just spun them back out. Like they bought them, tried to sell them, and then just spun them back out and let them go be their own business.
Okay, so I guess it's not
it's not a for certain thing, but I still think there is being in the console.
With what's been happening now, I don't buy it. With what's just been happening now, either Square has said we're going to do this, or somebody reached out to them and said, "Hey, how much would it take? How much would it cost?" And they're like, you know what? Okay, let's start doing this. So I think Square is probably making some advanced movements. So you hear it here first. 2 years, Square will be sold. Square is going to be owned by one of the big two. And when I say big two,
Embracer or this.
Nah, Embracer. Well, you never know.
Like there's this Embracer thing, but there's also Tencent. But I think it's a much more interesting story if it's Sony or Xbox.
It's going to be Sony. I think it's Sony.
I think it's Xbox. I think this reeks of.
I would say Xbox if they hadn't just got Activision. I think Sony is in. Whoa, dude, we got to do something.
I don't know. This could be a really good foot in. I mean, that's the thing. Xbox has needed that foot into Japan. They are gonna buy someone big in Japan.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And
Someone
unless they
big
do unless they do a 50, unless they can figure out a way to get Nintendo to put stuff on their system, they have to do something big, and that would be it. But you know what? We're at like 14, 15 minutes. We should probably just end it. But that's the main point, is that this deal has way larger implications than just this shadow company of Embracer, which I do want to talk about, because we compared to the Court of Owls and Batman, if you know Batman mythology, but it's like they're just like the shadow government, and they're like, you know, you got the two world superpowers fighting it out, while China over there is just slowly building up before suddenly you realize, oh wow, they got 1 billion people and they have the same technology as us. So we're gonna cut it here, and hopefully we can did you guys like this? Should we do more kind of like quick stuff? I don't even know if we got to the real point, but I think the point is Square, in our opinion, is being sold. I say Sony, he says Xbox. What do you think? Sony, Xbox, Nintendo? Who knows? But yeah, thank you. It's dangerous to go alone. Please share this video with a friend. We're going to be doing more stuff like this, some more live streams, and maybe even the podcast back together. But yeah, thank you guys, and we will see you on the flip.
Peace.